They sold over 110 million records worldwide. In 1973, they were the biggest album-selling artist in the United States, bigger than anyone. They created the most iconic guitar riff in rock history, a song inspired by actual flames. Then betrayal ripped them apart, not once, but twice. Members couldn't share the same stage. They fired each other. One guitarist called their music shoeshine music in pure disgust. Another member died from a heroin overdose at 25, just hours after his final performance. They went from recording 117 decibel concerts that knocked audience members unconscious to a humiliating breakup where the keyboardist later admitted, "We traveled the world and destroyed Deep Purple's reputation everywhere we played." Decades later, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but one founding member refused to even show up. This is the story of how brotherhood, fire, and fame created legends, and then burned everything to ashes. A tale of how success itself became the poison that destroyed the very thing that made them great. But to understand the collapse, we have to go back to Hertford, England, 1968. March 1968. Hertford, England. A former Searchers drummer named Chris Curtis had a vision, a supergroup concept that would revolutionize rock music. He called the project Roundabout. But Curtis was erratic, unstable, and dismissed before the band's first performance even happened. Enter 5 musicians who would change everything. Ritchie Blackmore, a guitarist with lightning fingers and a sharp tongue. John Lord, a classically trained keyboardist who wanted to marry rock with orchestra. Ian Pace, the drummer who would become the only constant through every lineup change, every war, every resurrection. Rod Evans on vocals and Nick Simper on bass completed the original Mark I lineup. The name? Deep Purple. Blackmore's grandmother's favorite song. Sentimental, beautiful, ironic, considering the violence that name would eventually represent. This wasn't just another British rock band trying to copy American blues. Deep Purple fused classical music structures with raw, heavy rock power. John Lord's Hammond organ didn't sit in the background. It battled Blackmore's guitar in duels that sounded like thunder and lightning fighting for dominance. Their debut performance was in Denmark, April 1968. First single? A cover called Hush that shot to number 4 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. America loved them before England even noticed. By 1969, they recorded Concerto for Group and Orchestra with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Critics were confused. Fans were mesmerized. Deep Purple was doing what no one else dared, treating rock music like high art. Their debut album, Shades of Deep Purple, landed in July 1968. Success came fast. Tours, pension, money starting to flow. But even in the beginning, the seeds of destruction were already there. Rod Evans and Nick Simper thought they were equal partners. They weren't. In July 1969, without warning, both were dismissed. Fired. Replaced by 2 new faces, Ian Gillan, a vocalist with a banshee scream that could shatter glass, and Roger Glover, a bass player who would become the band's emotional anchor. This was the Mark II lineup, the classic lineup, the lineup that would sell 110 million records. It was also the lineup that would prove you can't build an empire on a foundation of betrayal, because eventually, someone always gets betrayed next. Deep Purple in rock exploded like a bomb. This wasn't the experimental orchestral fusion of before. This was pure, unrelenting heavy metal thunder. Songs like Child in Time and Speed King announced a new era. Critics hated it. Fans worshipped it. The album sold 13.2 million copies worldwide. They followed up with Fireball in 1971, their first #1 album in the UK. Tours were relentless. Every night, a different city. Every stage, a battlefield between Blackmore's guitar and Lord's organ. Ian Gillan's voice became a weapon, hitting notes that didn't seem humanly possible. Then came December 1971. Montreux, Switzerland. They rented the Rolling Stones mobile studio and booked the Montreux Casino to record what would become their masterpiece. Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention were performing the night before their session. December 4, 1971. During Zappa's performance of King Kong, someone in the audience, a Czechoslovakian refugee named Zdenek Spica, fired a flare gun at the wooden ceiling. Flames. Chaos. Screaming. The Montreux Casino burned to the ground. Claude Nobbs, director of the Montreux Jazz Festival, pulled people from the flames. No one died. But the building was gone. Smoke rolled across Lake Geneva like a slow, dark ghost. Roger Glover woke from a dream days later with a phrase in his head, "Smoke on the water." They scrambled. Recorded Machine Head in the Grand Hotel instead. One track, Smoke on the Water, was recorded in a vacant theater called the Pavilion. The guitar riff, simple, for notes, eternal, was laid down in a single take. Police burst in during recording. They were disturbing neighbors 5 miles away. That's how loud Deep Purple was. Machine Head, released in 1972. 36.7 million copies sold worldwide. The best-selling album in Deep Purple's history. Smoke on the Water wasn't even released as a single until May 1973, a full year later. It hit number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. Today, it's sold over 1.76 million digital downloads. That guitar riff? One of the most iconic in rock history. Inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2017. Rolling Stone ranked it number 434 on the 500 greatest songs of all time. Because that riff made them immortal. But immortality came with a price. Made in Japan, dropped later in 1972, a live album that critics called one of the greatest live recordings of all time. 9 million copies sold. By 1973, Deep Purple was the biggest album-selling artist in the United States. Bigger than Led Zeppelin. Bigger than the Stones. Warner Brothers claimed they sold 12 million albums that year alone. They also earned another record. In 1972, at London's Rainbow Theatre, they were clocked at 117 decibels. 3 audience members lost consciousness. The Guinness Book of World Records crowned them the globe's loudest band. The Who would break that record in 1976 with 126 decibels. Eventually, Guinness stopped tracking the stat altogether to discourage hearing damage. The touring never stopped. The pressure never lifted. And inside the band, something invisible was cracking. Picture this, 1973. Deep Purple at the absolute summit of rock music. Stadiums are packed. Charts dominated. Fans screaming. Critics finally forced to acknowledge what they denied for years. This band was unstoppable. They completed their second tour of Japan in June 1973. The Japanese crowds worshipped them like gods. Every show sold out. Every note, perfection. Because while they looked unstoppable on stage, everything off stage was cracking. Ian Gillan, the voice of Deep Purple, the man who screamed "Child in Time" into legend, quit immediately after that Japan tour. Exhaustion, ego, creative suffocation, Ritchie Blackmore's controlling grip on the band's direction. The non-stop machine had ground him down to nothing. And then Blackmore made sure Roger Glover, the bassist and emotional glue, was dismissed right after. 2 members. Gone. Just like that. Mark III arrived. David Coverdale on vocals, Glenn Hughes on bass. New blood. New energy. But also new conflict. Hughes brought a funk and soul influence. The 1974 album, Burn, sold 8.2 million copies, but Ritchie Blackmore hated the direction. He called the next album, Stormbringer, shoeshine music. Publicly. With pure contempt. In June 1975, Blackmore quit. The man whose guitar riff defined a generation just left. Enter Tommy Bolin, an American guitarist from the James Gang, a virtuoso, a wild card. But Bolin came with demons. Heroin demons. The Mark IV lineup recorded 1 studio album, Come Taste the Band, 1975. It wasn't bad. But it wasn't Deep Purple. Late 1975. Japan tour. The country that once worshipped them watched in horror as Tommy Bolin stumbled through performances. A bad heroin fix had left his left arm weak. His fingers couldn't hit the notes. His eyes couldn't focus. The album, Last Concert in Japan, recorded in December 1975, captured the tragedy in real time. You can hear it, the mistakes, the hesitation, the shadow of what Deep Purple used to be. March 15, 1976. Liverpool. Deep Purple's final concert of the original era. The crowd didn't know it yet, but they were watching a funeral. July 19, 1976. Official disbandment. December 4, 1976. Exactly 5 years after the Montreux casino fire, Tommy Bolin played his final concert in Miami. He was opening for Jeff Beck. Hours later, he was found dead in his hotel room. Heroin, alcohol, cocaine, barbiturates. He was 25 years old. John Lord would later say, in brutal honesty, "We traveled the world and destroyed Deep Purple's reputation everywhere we played." The band that once knocked people unconscious with sheer volume had now knocked themselves out of existence. The members scattered like shrapnel. Ritchie Blackmore formed Rainbow, another successful project, but never as big as Purple. David Coverdale launched Whitesnake, achieving massive solo success in the 1980s. Ian Gillan fronted his own band, Gillan, and even briefly replaced Ronnie James Dio in Black Sabbath. John Lord toured as a solo classical artist, finally getting to explore the orchestral fusion he'd always dreamed of. Ian Pace, the constant, the survivor, played with everyone, waiting. For 8 years, Deep Purple was dead. But legacies don't die. They haunt. April 1984. The impossible happened. Mark II reunited. Blackmore, Gillan, Glover, Pace. All of them. Together again for the first time since 1973. The album, Perfect Strangers, dropped like a resurrection. 5.6 million copies sold. Number 5 in the UK. Only the second Deep Purple album to go platinum in the US. The 1985 reunion tour outgrossed every artist in America except Bruce Springsteen. They headlined Knebworth Fair in front of 80,000 fans in torrential rain. Thunder. Lightning. A biblical return. For a moment, it felt like healing. Like redemption. Like the brotherhood had been restored. The House of Blue Light came in 1987. But by 1989, the old poison was back. Creative differences. Ego clashes. Ritchie Blackmore's iron control suffocates everyone else. Ian Gillan, the voice that had screamed Deep Purple into legend, was fired. Joe Lynn Turner replaced him for one album, Slaves and Masters, 1990. Fans hated it. The band brought Gillan back in 1992 for The Battle Rages On. But Ritchie Blackmore had had enough. November 1993. Blackmore quit Deep Purple. For the second and final time. This time, it was forever. Joe Satriani filled in temporarily for a Japan tour in December 1993, another ghost playing for a band haunted by its own history. Steve Morse became the permanent replacement in 1994. A phenomenal guitarist. A kind man. But not Ritchie Blackmore. John Lord retired in 2002, replaced by Don Airey. And then in 2012, John Lord, the keyboardist who started it all, who fought guitar battles with Blackmore, who believed in orchestras and rock and roll, died. Decades later, the battle became about legacy. Who owns Deep Purple? Who gets to say they are Deep Purple? The band was first nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2012. Rejected. Nominated again. They ranked second in the public vote. Rejected again. Finally, 2016. Deep Purple was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Metallica's Lars Ulrich gave a passionate speech. 8 members were honored. Ritchie Blackmore, David Coverdale, Rod Evans, Ian Gillan, Roger Glover, Glenn Hughes, John Lord, posthumously, and Ian Pace. Ritchie Blackmore refused to attend. He didn't want to share a stage with them. Not even for history. Not even for immortality. The rift was irreversible. Today, Deep Purple still tours. Ian Pace, the only member who's been there since day one, still plays. Ian Gillan still sings, though the banshee scream has softened with age. Roger Glover is still there. Steve Morse and Don Airey carry the torch. They've released 23 studio albums. 49 live albums. Over 100 live recordings exist featuring their music in various forms. But Ritchie Blackmore plays medieval folk music with his wife in a band called Blackmore's Night. He has no interest in Deep Purple. No interest in reunions. David Coverdale occasionally hints at nostalgia but focuses on Whitesnake. The band that once sold 110 million records, created the most iconic riff in rock history, that was crowned the loudest band on earth, is still fractured. Success created legends. But it also created enemies. The fire at Montreux gave them smoke on the water, immortality in 4 notes. But internal fires, ego, control, betrayal, addiction, burned them from the inside out. They proved that harmony can hide rot. That brotherhood can be a performance. That the system designed to elevate artists can destroy them. Tommy Bolin died on the same date as the Montreux fire, December 4th. 5 years apart. A haunting symmetry. Deep Purple is part of the unholy trinity of British hard rock. Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple. They influenced Metallica, Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, and countless others. But they couldn't stay together. Fans still argue online. Which lineup was the best? Mark II purists versus Mark III defenders versus modern-era supporters. Ritchie Blackmore is now 79. Ian Gillan is 79. Ian Pace is 77. Time is running out. Will there ever be one final reunion? One final performance with Blackmore, Gillan, Glover, and Pace? Or will Deep Purple's legacy remain fractured forever? A cautionary tale of how even the loudest band on earth can't drown out the silence between former brothers? What part of this story hits you hardest? The Montreux fire? Tommy Bolin's death? The fact that Ritchie Blackmore refused to even show up to the Hall of Fame? Have you ever seen Deep Purple live? Which lineup? Drop your memory below. And if you want more stories like this, the rise, the fall, the wars that destroy legends, hit subscribe. Because rock history is full of bands that conquered the world and then lost themselves. Next up, we're diving into another legend that imploded. You won't want to miss it.